Last month, I read this article. It was actually an obituary in the paper, and it was about this guy. His name was Jack Whitaker, and kind of an interesting life, kind of a sad life in a way. He was, I think he was 72 when he died, but 18 years ago, he won the lottery, and he actually won $315 million, which at the time was the largest jackpot ever won in the United States. But then what happened in the 18 years since winning the jackpot, that was sort of the tragic aspect of this story. His life just kind of fell apart in so many aspects. He drank too much, and he was arrested a couple of times for DWI. His wife left him. He had a granddaughter who I guess was sort of like the love of his life, and he just spoiled her in like absurd ways. After winning the lottery, he was giving her a $2,000 a week allowance, and she was 17. He bought her 4 cars. It was just absurd. She was sort of, I guess, troubled to begin with, developed this unbelievable drug addiction. She died of an overdose. His house was burned down. He lost millions gambling. And they say he had this sort of crazy habit of carrying huge amounts of money with him, cash. He had a briefcase or some kind of a case, and he would keep crazy amounts of money in his car. One day, on one particular day, he had $500,000 stolen from his car. So it was just craziness. This life that had just become so reckless and so foolish, so sad, really, ultimately. And this is what he said about himself. A couple of years ago, he was being interviewed, and he said, I know I'm going to be remembered as the lunatic who won the lottery, and I'm not proud of that. I wanted to be remembered as someone who had helped a lot of people. I wish I had ripped up that ticket. And apparently that was a phrase or a statement that he said many times in the last couple of years of his life. I wish I had ripped up the lottery. I wish I'd never won it, because it made my life just implode. And it's, his life pre-lottery, it wasn't a bad life. He was a very successful guy, actually. He had a construction business that he owned. He was a millionaire. He was doing well. But he ultimately came to see this whole lottery thing as a curse on his life. I remember reading it, and I think when I read it a couple of weeks ago, I think I remember hearing about this guy. You hear these stories about lottery winners and how their lives kind of often go south after this moment. And I think sometimes, I'll bet you guys do too, like sometimes, like what would it be like to win the lottery? I mean, what would you do? What would you do with the money? Would you win say somehow you could win the lottery tonight and $50 million. Would you accept it? Well, I think most of us would, right? I mean, I know I would. I'm not kidding myself. Like I would say yeah, but I know I'd also be scared. Part of me is fearful that I'd become like Jack Whitaker, or at least resemble him in some way. I think I would accept it. I think I would accept the $50 million. But I'd have to do something first. Or at least I'd like to think I would do. I know I would need to do this first if I won a crazy amount of money. I'd have to fundamentally and radically and completely, absolutely order my life to God. I would so have to make God number one if I won money like that. Now, you're probably thinking, well, aren't we supposed to do that whether we win the lottery or not? Of course we are. We're supposed to live our lives. We're supposed to order our lives to God's. We're supposed to follow God. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting in this hot parking lot tonight if, on some level, we were like, of course. I want my life to be. I want God to be pleased with the life I'm living. So that's a given, lottery or not. But I think winning the lottery, man, if I wasn't really good with God and I had the fortune of millions of dollars coming my way, I'm just afraid I'd become corrupted. I'd become compromised. I'd become Jack Whitaker. If I really wasn't close with God. You know what I would need if I won the lottery tonight or any night? I'd need an understanding heart. An understanding heart. That's what Solomon asks for in this first reading tonight. God's talking to him and God says, what do you want? Like, you name it, I'll give it to you. What do you want? Ask me and it's yours. Sort of like, like the genie, when the genie says you got 3 wishes or whatever that is. That's sort of what's going on here. Except it's not a genie, it's God. And Solomon says, just give me an understanding heart. Don't give me the lottery. Don't give me power. Just give me an understanding heart. In other words, I think, give me wisdom. I mean, Solomon's always noted for his incredible wisdom. Give me wisdom. Let me see life through God's eyes and God's heart. St. Thomas Aquinas said, his description of wisdom, he said, wisdom is seeing from the height, like up high. That's where God is, at least, in our minds. So seeing from God's perspective. So living our lives in a way where, like, the decisions we make, the choices we make, things we say, they're seen and done through this filter of God, this God perspective, this wisdom light. And you know what? If I could do that, if I could have an understanding heart, if I really legitimately ordered my life to God in ways much more than I presently do, then bring on the lottery. I'll take the lottery, because you know what? I won't become a fool with it. I'll do great things with the lottery. I'll do noble things with the lottery if I'm God connected. Man, but if I'm not, then I will become blinded, intoxicated, you name it, by the money. If God isn't number one. I mean, that's sort of what he says Jesus does in this gospel tonight, this parable. These images, this pearl. This guy's looking for pearls. He's got a bunch of them, and they're all beautiful, they're all valuable, but there's one that is just so far above all the others. And he finds it. And then he goes and he says, well, the only way I can get this is if I give up what I've got. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. So he takes all the pearls that he's already got and he sells them. So he gets the one that matters. Well, the pearl is God. The pearl is this understanding heart. And he makes the same point again. He just sort of repeats it with this buried treasure image. Guy finds the treasure in the field. We know what the guy does? He buys the field, because that's where the treasure is. But the only way he can afford the field is if he sells everything else he's got. Something's got to give. We need to make room for the pearl and for the buried treasure. And what's that? It's not poetry. It's God. It's making God number one in our lives. You ever watch ESPN has this 30 for 30, sort of like a documentary series that they do. It's pretty good. It's pretty well done. And they'll just feature a famous athlete, or maybe it's a story, something over the last 30 or so years since ESPN has been around. Anyway, they did one a couple of years ago that I watched. I was excited when I heard that they were putting it out. It was about Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry, the New York Mets, former Mets. It was called Doc and Darryl. And it profiled their careers, especially when they were with the Mets, which is really when they were at their best. They were phenomenal. They just had this raw kind of God-given talent. I mean, if you're a Met fan and you were around in the 80s, I mean, Dwight Gooden was just not to be believed. Just was striking out people in outrageous numbers. He was awesome. And Darryl Strawberry, like, people were saying that he was going to be the next Mickey Mantle. That's how just talented he was. So anyway, in this documentary, they profile that, how awesome these two guys were. And then they profile their fall from grace, their careers that just ended prematurely because of drug use. And they spent a lot of time on that. I mean, the number of arrests and suspensions and scandals connected to these two was, you almost didn't believe it. Like, how many times could you get arrested? How many times could you get suspended? But they did, and it just sort of these two guys had their careers continued even somewhat like it had been in the early days. They absolutely would have been Hall of Fame members. But neither of them are, and they never will be, because their careers just stopped. It's interesting, in the documentary, toward the end of it, there's a little bit of a divergence. The whole time they're talking about these two guys and how they were similar in good ways and similar in sort of sad ways. But then they kind of separated because Strawberry got his life together. I mean, he's been sober for the last, I think, almost 20 years. In fact, he's become a pastor. Gives these motivational talks. He speaks to schools, and he just talks about the seductive nature of money and power, and certainly drugs, and how if you don't have God in your life, those things are just going to eat you up. And he's like, look at me, look at my career. I'm walking, talking proof that if you don't make God number one in your life, all those other things, they're going to eat you up. They're going to kill you. So anyway, his story kind of ends positively, but poor Dwight Gooden's doesn't really. He's clearly, obviously, still battling drugs. In fact, last summer he was arrested. I think he was arrested twice, like in 6 weeks' time. One guy talks about this buried treasure that he ultimately discovered, this pearl of great price, God. And he says, yeah, that's how my life became ordered and peaceful and meaningful. Prior to that, yeah, it was, I was an all-star and I got a couple of World Series rings, but my life was a disaster. He was like the guy who won the lottery. This is what Strawberry said. He was talking to a group of kids, and he said this: I want you to find out who you are in Christ, not who you are in what you do. And I was talking to a couple, two couples actually, at dinner a couple of nights ago, and one of them's one woman, she's a mom, and she was talking about a couple of her kids who are in their 30s now, and she was saying how one of them in particular, it's her daughter, and she's just hoping so much she meets a good guy to marry. She wants to get married, she wants to have a family, and the mom just says she prays for her, like she prays every day. Just says a prayer like, let the right guy come into her life. And then she said this, and this was such wisdom, I think, in this. She said, I just want him to have a relationship with God. I just want him to have good faith. Because I think this woman knows, man, if her daughter meets a guy who has good faith, who's good with God, they're going to be great. They're going to have a great life. They're going to have a great marriage and family. Yeah, would it be nice if the guy was a doctor or a lawyer and really wealthy and really good looking and really this and really that? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like winning the lottery. Who doesn't want those things? We all kind of want those things. We all hope for those things. But if we got wisdom, we realize none of those things equal a meaningful life. They're all peripheral. All that matters is God. And that's her prayer. That guy, Jack Whitaker, the lottery guy, he used to openly refer to his winning the lottery as his curse. It cursed his life. Well, I don't think he was right about that. I know what he meant, but I think he was wrong. I don't think the curse was winning the lottery. The curse was winning the lottery and having no wisdom. Winning the lottery and giving your 17-year-old granddaughter $2,000 a week. That lacked wisdom. And all the other sad things that he did in the midst of just sort of this explosion of crazy wealth. But if he had wisdom, if he had God wisdom, if he had the wisdom that Solomon communicated, this understanding heart thing, I don't think his life would have been tragic. That quote where he said, I'm kind of a joke. I'm the fool who won the lottery, but I wish I was the guy who had done great things. That's what it would have been that. His obituary would have been, yeah, this guy did so much good with what he was given. But sadly, it's not. He was kind of the fool. So let's not be the fool. And it's easy to be the fool. I mean, isn't it just easy to be seduced by pearls and treasures that they're not the most important. They're not nothing, but they're not the most important. And when we make them number one, we become Jack Whitaker. We become Dwight Gooden. I thought that was a pretty good line. I want you to find out who you are in Christ, not who you are in what you do. In other words, seek God's wisdom. See life through God's eyes. Try to see from the height.